Assalamualaikum. I'm Dr. Amnah Bhatti, and today we're all sitting together. We're all part of the team of ABCW, Amnah Bhatti Chiropractic and Wellness. And today's the first time that we're having a joint podcast to discuss the collaborative effort that goes on behind the scenes at ABCW. On my left, we have Mona Hydari, who is our mat Pilates coach and breathing specialist. And on my right, we have Daniyal Muzaffar, who's our DDPY instructor.
I'm the Pilates therapist, and I'm also a breathing therapist. And so I use these two modalities to re-educate the client in terms of their posture, in terms of basic movement patterns, and try to kind of reintegrate the client back into their bodies.
So what I do is DDPY, which stands for Diamond Dallas Page Yoga. It was developed by a wrestler by the name of Diamond Dallas Page, who, because of his lifestyle, had suffered a lot of injuries. He had back-related issues, knee issues, ankle issues, neck issues. So he needed to develop a system that could help him sustain the muscles that he had, as well as improve his flexibility in order to improve his life moving forward.
So this collaboration came about because of a need. Because of a need in society for having people who are trained and know what to do in terms of the human body and anatomy, and take an individual from point A, where they may be in pain or where they maybe have had injuries, from that point on to point B, where they're recovering, or they're rehabilitating, and then point Z, where they've elevated, to leading a fully functional, absolutely amazing lifestyle. So today what we're going to be talking about is we're talking about child health and injuries. There is going to be a lot of talk about how children engaging in sports, in school, how their strength and conditioning impacts not just the sports that they're playing, but also how injuries attached to that lack of strength and conditioning can impact the child's well-being. We're going to be talking about adult health and injuries as well. And that kind of summarizes the entire topic, because we have a lot of adults coming in, not just in pain, but repetitive injuries, so chronic injuries that over a period of time can then lead to debilitating issues. We're going to be talking about seniors and our favorite part of the discussion, in fact, which is senior health. There's never a time when it's too late to start working out or too late to start working on your functionality. And that's something that our discussions will put across to you.
So I think that, especially with children, I think one of the main things is that we're not facilitating enough movement for children. So, if you see, for example, if you see a playground and you see like a climbing frame and you see the monkey bars and you see the slide and the swings, just that in terms of like, from a fitness professional's perspective, that is like the ideal backdrop for developing really healthy bodies. So if you see children jumping, right, which is so good for bone health, just the upper body strength you need to get from one side of a monkey bars to the other is just phenomenal, right? Children racing around to catch each other. So even on a swing, the vestibular stimulation and the core strength you need to do that. So just spending a couple of hours in a playground would be you don't need so much intervention, but things like that are not happening.
Well, that's quite interesting, because as you said, core strength is something that seems to be lacking these days in everybody, not just kids. And I think we also seem to somewhat discount the fact that kids up to a certain age are actually growing into their bodies. So they need that movement, they need a certain form of, I wouldn't suggest it should be a regimented routine as far as exercise is concerned. I think there should be more play involved in it, which seems to be lacking in today's society, since kids are holed up inside the house on their gadgets or their PS5s, etc. But I think what a lot of people fail to take into consideration is that these kids are still growing into their bodies. They're not entirely comfortable with who they are. They're still getting used to it, especially when they get their sudden growth spurt around about 12 or 14 years of age. And, you have a completely, you develop this body which is alien to you somewhat. You have these limbs which are all of a sudden dangling long, and you don't quite know how to tackle that particular issue. And kids, when they're forced to go out and play certain sports, for example, when we're in school, you're told to play cricket or football or, volleyball, basketball, whatever. You tend to be more prone to injuries simply because of the fact that, number one, you haven't actually developed that core strength through play over time while you were in that development phase. And you not actually being used to moving with your body is, I think, one of the primary reasons why kids today are facing a lot of the injuries and issues that may perhaps, a decade ago or 2 decades ago, people from our generation, for example, did not see, or they weren't as common in our generation.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine if you look at kids riding bikes, right? Kids skipping, just and the kind of mind-body integration that comes from doing, the double skipping and things like that. So you have play in the initial years, and then you have a little bit of facilitation where you have activities and games that help children develop their strength and their balance, their agility, their their cognition, absolutely. And so that's the basis. And then when they start to play formal sports, then you need something a little bit different in terms of strength and conditioning to make sure that the muscles that are needed and the skills that are needed to play that sport, they're developing simultaneously.
Yeah, and also I feel like a lot of times that when children come in with injuries to the clinic, there's a lot of conversation about, okay, where does it hurt? But nobody's really talking about, why did it start hurting? What was the injury that caused it? It's always about, let's patch that part up and then let the child go back into sports. But are you really recognizing the the biomechanics of the child's structure? Is the child using his quadriceps more versus his core? Is the child using his not using his hamstrings and his glutes at all? Is the posterior chain not being used? So the mind-body connection, even in children, is essential. I've had children come in sitting in front of their parents. I'm taking a history, and they're talking about, I always ask the child, do you get headaches? And he was like, yes, I get headaches like 4 or 5 times a week. And the parents are completely blown away. They're like, we didn't know that our child got headaches. So children also have issues as far as symptomatology is concerned. And it may not just be focused around the injuries that they're getting, but it's got a lot to do with the cognition, like Daniyal said. It's got a lot to do with that mind-body connection that's missing.
And I think that what we're seeing in the clinic is a lot of children, especially early on, coming in with injuries because they're starting to play a sport. They don't have, they're not doing any strength and conditioning. And the thing about for children, I mean, they're seeing this more and more, that it's really important to play a diverse amount of sports, and not to really specialize too early on.
And also strength train for their sport, which is not happening.
Yeah. And then they get these repetitive stress injuries, and then, we'll kind of work on
that. Which then become chronic.
And then they'll go back to doing the same thing.
So have you actually developed your muscles to go through those explosive movements, or to, sustain them up to a certain degree? It's very easy for you to push your child into a specific sport, perhaps out of your own interest in that particular sport. But end of the day, the development that goes into him playing that sport is not something that, you can simply pick up a racket, go to the court, start knocking the ball around. You need to develop the muscles around your core. You need to develop the muscles around your shoulders, your back, to actually sustain prolonged exposure to that particular sport.
And also, I feel like the coaches need to understand the biomechanics of that sport and how a child's body is geared towards performing in that particular sport. So for instance, rowing, we get so many rowers coming in who are not rowing the proper way. They're not using their calf muscles. They're not generating that energy from their calves. They're just using the upper body, and that's where all the injuries happen. So I think there's a little bit of a lack of information in general as well about biomechanics as far as children's bodies are concerned. So yeah, that's also an issue that we get a lot.
I think part of it also has to do with the fact that we as a nation tend to fall into a comfort zone. I mean, I see it in not just children and their sporting activities, but everyday fields as well. So I feel people in this country, once they attained a certain degree of knowledge, they stop actually looking for answers or stop trying to develop themselves further to investigate or to look into the nitty-gritties or to improve themselves overall. I think that is also part of the reason, because once you've attained a certain level of expertise or a certain level of, endurance in a sport, you decide this is it for me, and now I am an expert at this particular sport, or, I know exactly what to do and what not to do over here. So you mentally, I guess, you switch off and you don't have that desire to go out and look at the new research in that particular field or to improve yourself. And I think that is when old practices seem to become bad practices, because you keep getting into those patterns, and eventually those patterns seem to erode over time as well, because to a certain degree comfort sets in, to a certain degree laziness sets in, and you tend to forget those patterns that you initially started
and
off
parents
with.
really aren't geared to spot those discrepancies in the person training their child, which eventually then leads to that child getting injured repetitively, and then that injury will then lead on into adulthood. I've had patients come in their 50s and their 60s saying, हमारा spine अभी क्यों खराब है, हमने तो पूरी जिंदगी sports खेली है, इसलिए खराब है because you never trained for your sport. And that's exactly what I see happening in children ranging from the ages of 10 to 17, 18 now, because they're not really training for that particular sport. They're just going out there and just, rowing for like 6 hours a day and swimming for 6 hours a day or playing soccer for 6 hours a day. And they're doing it over and over again. And that injury then becomes part of that muscle memory in the spine, and the spine sort of holds on to it.
And I think
right?
it's also because adults, if you're playing that sport because you want the accolades or you want it to look good on your resume, but really we should need to work backwards, again, looking at very young children, that the point that sport is about movement. It's about health. It's about, better cognition. It's about physical development. It's about social development. And so if we look at children in terms of their movement activities, first and foremost in terms of this is really important for their development, this is really important for their health and well-being, not just in childhood, but into their adult years, then we'll stop looking at sport as something that, how do we improve on our sport so we can get medals?
Yes.
And to look at every child should be partaking in numerous activities, movement activities, in order for their well-being.
I think Amna made a great point here with when she stated that, a lot of times the parents aren't equipped to actually judge whether if their kids are being coached properly or not. I mean, for example, if my son wants to play football, I never played football, so I really don't know if what he's being coached with or the movements that he's being taught or the exercises that they're making him go through, the warm-up routine, etc., does that actually address his needs for that particular sport? Similarly, if I've never rowed in my life, I really have no idea what the coach is instructing my child, whether if it's actually a sport appropriate or not. I think that's where the expertise of somebody like Amna comes in, or somebody like you, Mona, comes in, and the parents can come in. They have a soundboard. You can actually, you guys are in an ideal position to actually look at the kids and inform the parents whether if their muscle development is uniform or whether if there's a certain part of their body which is being stressed far more than the other. So a lot of times in my case, a few of my clients who come in, I know whenever they're standing in front of me, I can see they're crooked. They may be leaning to one side, they may be leaning to another. So that's an imbalance they have in their body. And, it's something that never got addressed. When they went into the gym instructor told them, "Ki aap weights lift kare, khud hi sahi ho jayega." And that just doesn't happen. When you go into a gym, the first thing that should happen is your instructor or your, whomever you have there should first analyze your body, look at the deficiencies in your body, see if you're maybe leaning to a side, if your shoulders are rolled forward, if you have a humpback, your neck is forward. Whatever postural issues you have should be the first thing that are addressed when you walk into a gym. Similarly, when you start playing a sport, the first thing they should address are any structural issues that you have, because unless you don't address those issues, they seem to compound, right? So they pile on, and that's when injuries start happening. That's when, you can, if you have rounded shoulders, you can go in, you can, start bench pressing, you can start doing bicep curls, etc. You will develop a chest, you will develop biceps, but unfortunately you will have a frequency of injuries simply because those rolled shoulders and that forward neck issue was never addressed. And as your muscles grow, those bad postural issues that you have will actually be reinforced rather than being addressed.
It's really funny that you talked about the rounded shoulders, because my son, he always talks about our kids get adjusted on a regular basis. So we have, usually and they work out also as well. So it balances out. But my son the other day was mentioning that, Mama, so many kids need to come in and see you because all these children have pain from their backpacks, because their backpacks are so heavy. They're not ergonomic backpacks. They're carrying them a certain way where their shoulders are pulled forward.
Or just on one shoulder.
Or just on one shoulder. And, their backpacks are incredibly heavy. Like when you look at them and the school does provide lockers, but at the same time, it's just such a rush to get to the next class. They don't really utilize the lockers as much. So these muscle memories are coming into not just the muscles, they're coming into the joints, they're coming into the spine. The loading in the spine is disrupted because certain parts of your spine, which is the lower half of your spine, is supposed to take most of the load. Whereas when a child is carrying a backpack hunched forward, they're holding most of the load on their upper back and their shoulders, which is not supposed to take that load. So again, these are little things that as parents need to focus on and address by a trained professional versus just saying, okay, hurry up, it's time. We need to eat lunch quickly and we need to be off for swim practice or rowing practice, because the decisions you make today will impact your child's health in their next decades, which is in their 20s, 30s, 40s. And will there be somebody then to address these issues? That is why we're sitting together and getting this information out there for everyone, so that you are able to make an informed decision.
As a kid, you're also bulletproof, right? So a lot of issues that you and I may face, they don't face instantaneously, at least. So for them, it is more of over a few years, they may face this particular issue because they have bad posture, or because a lot of kids I see a lot of kids when they play football, they want to do the slide. So every time they score or something, they'll drop down to their knees and start sliding on the grass. And I always tell them, I said, listen, please don't do that, because this is going to give you bad knees. You're not feeling it today. You won't feel it a year from now, or 2 years from now, but 5 or 10 years from now. The mileage on your knees will start accumulating. And eventually you'll wish you never slid on the grass, right? Or on the cement, wherever you're playing. So, it's as a child, you tend to be bulletproof. You don't tend to look forward, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. Will this particular movement or will this particular exercise lead to any issues for me? And I think that's where the parents need to come in, and they need to actually guide their kids and inform them that, having the proper posture or having proper technique when you're going through certain movements is essential for you to ensure that you have longevity as far as your joints are concerned, and in fact, longevity as far as your joint health is concerned and your overall health is concerned. Because if your joints are hurting, if you have trouble getting out of bed in the morning, that will eventually affect your overall health as well.
I think that what you're saying about the awareness in terms of posture, that's with my clients, I always see that it's just the unglamorous and not so fun part of doing the work, is really becoming very aware of how you're holding your body. So it's a little bit boring. And so people don't really want to do that work. And so they're like, what's the point of this? But what I've noticed is that even children, even young children, and certainly adults, when they actually commit to the work and they actually start to become aware of how they're holding their bodies, they are really blown away about, by how, basically, they figure out what is happening in terms of the injury and the way that they're holding their bodies.
And the difference between how they were doing it before to how they're doing it now.
That a lot of times it's also very intuitive for them, right? Once you actually explain it to them, it becomes very intuitive. That's where the mind and the body connection comes in, right? Essentially, those two things click all of a sudden, and you're like,
Exactly. So what you were saying is you can see that they're crooked, and so making them aware that they're crooked, and they're like, oh my God, I never knew that I was loading on one side, or that I'm like hunching, or that I'm like bending to one side. And once they become aware, and then we talk a lot about orienting yourself to the midline, right? So that you're as symmetrical on both sides as possible. Obviously, it's not possible to be completely symmetrical, but to the extent where you're able to bring yourself into that symmetry, it's really very powerful for people.
So when patients come in, generally they bring in a lot of information as far as, this is ye meri puri history hai pain ki. This is what I've been accumulating in terms of MRIs, X-rays, blood reports, prescriptions. A lot of people have acute pain. A lot of them have chronic pain. They've had pain for a very long time. And they've been going from one person to the next in terms of getting a quick fix solution. And the discussion here today is going to be not about giving people quick fix solution, because nobody has a quick fix solution. We have, you have to start understanding that spinal health, muscle health is something that is built upon. So any time to start doing that is a good time. Even if you're in your 60s, it's a good time because you're building towards your 70s, right? So generally जो question मेरे पास आता है जब मैं MRI लगाती हूँ viewfinder पे, वो ये होता है कि why I'm 25 or I'm 35, why does my spine look like this? Why do I have a disc? Why do I have arthritic changes? And the conversation always goes back to, what did you do when you were growing up? What do you do now in terms of sitting? What do you do now in terms of activity? And that's what we're gonna discuss right now. So
I think that we have two probably major conditions, lifestyle-wise, coming into the clinic, and just generally with the population at large. One is we're just too sedentary, and secondly is that we don't have enough knowledge, and we go into the gym in a deconditioned. With a deconditioned body, and then we get injuries. Yes. So I think that that's usually the two reasons people are coming into the clinic. And that's
basically what they say as well, is like, oh, I work out like 5 days a week. I work out 6 days a week. Why does my spine look like this? Why am I in constant pain? It's because they're not understanding that their body isn't working out symmetrically, because the sides that you're misaligned, you're not essentially using that entire side as well as
symmetrically. And also, I think that there's so many components to fitness, and we don't really focus as much on some of them as we should. So one is stability. So Pilates is all about stability. Pilates is the part of you that's not moving is as important, or sometimes more important, than the part of you that is moving. And I think that not enough fitness professionals are focusing on stability. Yes. So you've got stability, you've got strength, obviously, and you want to work the back side of your body as much as you're working the front side of your body. You've got balance, you've got endurance, you've got so many aspects of strength and conditioning that sometimes get overlooked. And I think so, even if you're going into the gym and you're just doing weights, because everybody wants to do weights, you're not getting a complete workout. I think that's one of the issues.
And also they're working from their trainer's ego, where I'm sorry, I have to say it because it happens so much. I see it in my practice all the time, where like they're coming in and they're like, my trainer makes me do this many squats, my trainer makes me do this many lunges. Well, but are they like working for you? Are they working for your body? Essentially, they're not, because you could come in here with an injury. So I think that Daniyal also faces that a lot, like in terms of his DDPY, where people are like, I need to lift heavier, I need to lift more.
Well, I primarily blame our roads for our spinal condition today. But having said that, I do wholeheartedly agree with the fact that people themselves also tend to ego lift. I think there seems to be this culture of getting over pain. So no pain, no gain sort of culture, I think, is actually being counterproductive as far as our overall health is concerned, our spinal health is concerned. So a lot of times when you walk into a gym, the gym trainer that you will encounter is a former bodybuilder himself. Now I would suggest there are more trainers who are formally trained, who have a proper educational background as far as physical training is concerned. But traditionally, when I was growing up, the majority of trainers you had were former bodybuilders who was either a Mr. Karachi or Mr. Pakistan or Mr. Sindh, something along those lines. And, he knew what to do and he knew how to do it best. So because he had actually managed to develop his body, he felt he was in a position to actually develop your body as well. And while we're all different and, there may be a reason for you to push through the pain, but honestly speaking, I have never in my life actually gone into any sport thinking I will take this up as a profession. So if I am doing something recreationally or if I'm doing something just to better myself, there is no reason for me to push through the pain. I mean,
I think that's the first thing that I would say is if you're feeling pain, then
just stop. Your
right?
body is giving you that signal.
Exactly.
Listen to it.
And so to know, to be able to differentiate between this does not feel comfortable and I don't really like this movement to okay, I'm just being a little bit lazy, right?
Here's the thing. There's discomfort and then there's pain, right? So if you're feeling discomfort, by all means, try pushing through it, right? But if you get to that pain threshold, that's where you stop. Right? So if I'm doing, for example, if you're doing the pigeon stretch with one of your patients, right? They don't have the greatest flexibility in the world. They will feel discomfort in that position. And that's natural. There will be a certain degree of discomfort. But if he's feeling pain in that position, then you modify that for him, right? So do an elevated pigeon or, perhaps pull your leg further back so you're more comfortable in that position. So I think there's somewhat degrees
and also just to be able to learn to differentiate between there's discomfort that is pointing towards I'm not doing this correctly, and there's discomfort in terms of I'm not very mobile or I'm not very flexible.
But that's where your trainer comes in, right?
Exactly.
This is what the trainer should be identifying for you is that, listen, you have tight glutes, you have a tight lower back, you have tight hamstrings. This is why you're in discomfort. But if you end up tearing your hamstring, then clearly you were in pain. It wasn't discomfort.
No, but I'm not going to gym bash at this point in time, but I do feel like what happens when you guys say this, it happened, like trainers do sort of isolate that area and say, all right, we're not going to work on that area, right?
No, I mean,
and what that does
if you look at all the gym bros, everybody's got a nice chest,
yes.
Everybody's got great biceps, they have no legs.
But,
everybody skips leg day.
So I'm not talking about the gym bros, that's a different discussion altogether, but I'm talking about the people coming in who say, oh, I mentioned to my trainer that I have low back pain. And now the trainer I'm just not working on the low back at all. So what happens is, again, they're lifting a lot from the top, but they're doing nothing for the low back, which then eventually ends up with core issues.
You actually reinforcing that lower back pain, right?
Yes.
Because
they're not trained in biomechanics. That's the thing.
But biomechanics, apni jagah, but end of the day, it comes down to the fact that this gym trainer was essentially a former bodybuilder. He was never educated formally in kinesiology or health and fitness. Because if he was, then he would have, the first thing before even making you pick up a single weight, he would have said, well, let's address your back issue. Let's see why you're having that back pain. I mean, do you have a condition where you may need to go and see a doctor, or is it simply muscle weakness and the fact that your core needs to be strengthened before you move on to this routine? And that is what's severely lacking as far as our gym trainers are concerned.
For me, working with Amnah, that gives me a lot of confidence because I can come and say what's contraindicated. And we've had this conversation so many times where it's like, you're like, it's okay, push them a little bit.
Yeah.
I usually think my approach is usually take more time to get to where you want to go. There's no hurry. It's better to get there, slow and steady and build a good foundation. But sometimes it's really, it helps to have a clinical perspective where it's like, no, it's okay. You can
push it.
Yeah.
But just that little bit of encouragement that patients need has to come from an informed source is what we're talking about. So when people come in and they're talking about, oh, my trainer just avoids this area and just so because that's the area I have pain in, you're babying that area and essentially you're telling your brain to block it off completely and not use it, which means that sure, you're not using it in the gym, but like you're bending down to pick up a book or something one day and your back locks up. And why did that happen? Because your spine is just not used to movement in that area, which is why it's absolutely essential when you're training. You have informed professionals taking care of you and making you understand how your body's supposed to move. Right?
Well, I think there are two schools of thought as far as that process is concerned. The first one is, agar aapko dard ho raha hai, to let's not work on it, right? let's wait till that pain resolves itself. So you've actually never addressed that particular issue, the reason why the pain took place. The second school of thought, as far as your gym trainers are concerned, is dard ho raha hai, iska matlab hai area kamzor hai. Let's work on it. Let's put some weight on it. Let's try and build some muscle on it, and
That's
maybe
when
it
the
will
disc
improve.
comes out.
And maybe it will improve.
Yeah.
Eventually ends up getting a disc, needs to come and see you, or a worst case scenario, needs to go in and see a neurosurgeon or something along those lines. But nobody really works on the fact that aapko ye masla hai, let's try and shore this up without any weights. Let's try and get you doing some calisthenics, some body weight exercises. Let's strengthen this area
And
first.
address the cause of the dysfunction always. If you have pain, that is your body's signal of telling you that there's something wrong. So you need to listen to your body and get diagnosed as to why the pain exists, so that you can eventually then build towards elevating your function instead of limiting it, right?
What I really appreciate about Pilates and the contemporary Pilates and the move in the field in the current environment is that there's an infinite amount of regressions for any kind of movement, right? And what you're saying is, what Daniyal is saying in terms of strengthening and mobilizing that area, you can go to the most basic level and start there, build it up and then move forward. And I think that that's the key in good rehabilitation.
I mean, even when you go to a gym and you have a trainer who knows what he's doing, he's not, for example, when you start bench pressing, he's not going to put you on the bench on the first day. So he starts you off on a circuit training, more of a circuit training. You start off on the static machines, and then you eventually build your way up to that, bench and start doing the bench press. And once you have the technique done, even with the bench press, the first thing they'll make you do it with is an empty bar. There's absolutely no weight on that bar whatsoever, simply to get your body and your muscles used to that particular movement. So the muscle memory is the first thing that needs to be built as far as that movement is concerned, because if your movement is not correct, there are chances, even something as simple as a bench press, you end up tearing your shoulder, you end up tearing your pec. So the possibility of injuries.
Because that is the way it should be done. But if you have a client coming in saying, "I've got 6 weeks till my wedding," or I'm going on holiday in 6 weeks, and I need to lose this much, and
Here's
I want to be
a number of a nice plastic surgeon.
right. So that's where the problem comes in.
I usually, when patients come in, I usually tell them, I'm like, okay, show me a squat right now, or show me a lunge right now, and I know right away that this is, they're like wobbling all over this, so I know right now that their sacrum isn't working. I know that their the foot grip isn't right. This is something that trainers should be pointing out. This is not something that biomechanically we're working with, and then we're going back and educating the trainers that, look, this is what you need to be working on.
Yeah, but a lot of times these trainers are not receptive to your input, right? Because they've been doing things for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and they know best. So the problem is not really.
Well, that's about finding the right people to work with.
It's about the trainer. It's also about educating
the patient.
That look, slow and steady.
Yes.
Preventing injury is part of training.
Absolutely. And if you have a pre-existing injury, then you should always have that looked into before you get back into the swing of things, because it's just
but
it's not working for you, right?
You want to tell the patient something, he goes back to the gym, he tells his trainer that, he communicates that particular point to his trainer, and the trainer says, nahi, hum is tarah karenge, wo hame pata hai. And that leads to a lot of confusion for the patient himself, because he gets these two contradictory pieces of advice, one from his doctor, one from his trainer.
And that's when I send them to you guys. Because I get that a lot, where the patient comes in and says that आपने तो जो बताया था, जो आपकी टीम ने बताया था, वो मैंने trainer को बताया, and the trainer is not willing to do it because they feel like it's too basic and I won't lose weight. The whole concept of losing weight and building strength are two different things. I prefer people who build strength. I prefer people understanding what strength is, because weight is just a byproduct. Once you start converting that into muscle mass, the weight will just shed off. So weight shouldn't be a priority to you. It should be about strength.
I think as far as weight loss is concerned, the formula for weight loss is very simple, right? So input needs to be less than output, essentially, is your formula for weight loss. So, you can lose weight without going to the gym for a single day in your life. Simply by eating less than what you do. And what you may find people doing...
That would be very difficult.
Yeah.
That would be very difficult.
But what you do find people doing is justifying that extra, cupcake or that extra slice of
because
cake.
I'm going to the gym.
Because I walked for half an hour today, or I walked for an hour today. So, I can treat myself to this extra slice of cake or this extra chapati, or, have this extra whatever they're fancy at the moment. Which is sort of a defeatist mindset, especially if you're somebody who's trying to lose weight, because in the end of the day, it's not just exercise or it's not just diet, but it's a combination of both those things, right? So for a healthy, for you to actually lose weight in a healthy manner, you need to incorporate diet and exercise into your regime. And a lot of times people ask me, should I change my diet? And my advice to them is, don't bother with it, because see if you notice any results. And if you do start seeing some results because of keeping your diet static and incorporating some exercise into your life, that's when you can go back into your diet and see, where can I improve my diet? How can I clean it up? Because I don't want your body to go into shock, right? So if you stop eating all of a sudden, there was an exercise routine that was happening a couple of years ago. It was very famous. It had, I think, stadiums full of people doing it, and they would give you a diet plan with it as well. But the diet plan was essentially starving yourself. So once you came off that diet plan, once you were done with that routine, how were you able to sustain that weight loss?
So again, it's about the mind-body connection, right? So it's and I do find this, that when you start exercising or you start moving more, you become more connected to your body, and your body signals in terms of what you should be eating, how much you should be eating, becomes a little bit more regulated. So
the gut-brain axis is so important when it comes to, and we'll talk about this eventually in the later episodes, the vagus nerve and how it impacts your gut-brain communication and how it impacts your digestion in the long run. You were talking about
I was saying that becoming more in tune with your body regulates your appetite. It regulates, your understanding of what you should be eating, how much you should be eating.
Are you eating in fight flight? Are you eating
something as simple as lack of sleep will make you eat, right? So if
lack
you're not
sleep,
getting enough sleep, you're going to start eating junk simply to fuel yourself.
The basics are not so difficult. It's just, everybody knows you need to get a good night's sleep. You need to be eating well and at regular times. You need to be hydrated. You need to be moving. It's not rocket science, really, but having someone guide you and give you, like you said, informed
options.
Informed
options.
It helps.
And specifically doing that for your children, I feel is sort of building their future. And I think that's very important. And even for you, even for adults, even for seniors, you can do this at any point in time. You just have to be open to it and understand that, you need to go see the right people who can show you that, those options, and teach you how to go about doing it the right way. So I think we've had an amazing discussion. Thank you guys for being here. And we took out time on our public holiday to be together and share an amazing discussion. We had a wonderful time. I hope you enjoyed the information that we shared and you got a lot out of it. That is the purpose that we were aiming for, is to get information out to you and get enough information out so that you would be intrigued enough to post some comments down below and maybe contact us if you have any questions. Do check out our Insta page, our Facebook page, and our website. That has a lot of information on it. We're very information heavy. If you're interested in getting into a routine, if you're interested in resolving an injury, come on in and check out the team at ABCW. Thank you.